decision.
Z agrees to join up, but Sky objects.
She's a criminal. Duly noted.
Sir, we've been here for years, and you put her with us.
Cadet, you may be wise to remember that she was a worthy opponent despite your prior training and greater number. She is your new team member.
Yes, sir!
I expect you to treat her as such.
Grum kills the Bluehead for failing and dispatches another one. Z goes to talk to Jack, trying to convince him to enlist, but she fails. Kruger identifies the robots to the others and says they're soldiers for the Trubian Empire. He also explains about how the Bluehead they fought is a more elite version of the Crybots, which explains why Grum can just crush one and order up another exactly like it. The group are sent to clean up after a battle that A-Squad was having, and Bridge detects the energy fields of several Crybots searching for something in the wreckage. Z explains about the device they tossed away earlier. One of the robotic patrol dogs frees Jack so it can help save Boom, who's accidentally been knocked out by an experiment. Jack explains that he turned down the proposition to become a ranger.
Excuse my bluntness, but what are you, whacked? I would give anything to be a Power Ranger. Me? I flunked out of the academy.
The group recovers the device, and Sky wants to bring it back to Kruger, but the others want to investigate on their own, Z even quoting regulations that they're allowed to take their own initiative. Not that this scene doesn't display some good writing, but on the other hand, wouldn't going back and using the HQ's resources make more sense than just stumbling around? Z consults one of her street contacts, Piggy, who tells them that it's a proton accelerator. The Bluehead arrives, and the four morph and take him on. In the distraction of the fight, Piggy takes the accelerator. No one apparently decided to put Jack back in his cell since he wanders around while the Rangers call for backup. However, there's nobody that can be spared, and Jack overhears, realizing Z's in trouble. After some Crybots are brought in to distract the Rangers, Jack goes in and morphs into the Red Ranger. Jack defeats the monster, but then a mysterious figure flips a switch that changes the entire appearance of the thing and makes it grow. Okay, it's a giant robot that it's piloting, but you don't necessarily know that at first. They call in for the Zords, but Kruger tells them to stand down since A-Squad is dispatched to deal with it. The monster is destroyed, and we see that Piggy has delivered the proton accelerator to Grum, who flies his ship into the wormhole. Kruger says that the accelerator allows the Trubians to travel unimpeded through the galaxy, and that while they may become Great Rangers someday, they're not quite at their best yet. Beginnings, despite the cliched title, is an excellent start to the season. This is a very different start to a Power Rangers season, with a lot of elements that I really enjoyed. The Rangers are shown to be competent fighters, and the bickering felt very natural. The Rangers themselves have very strong characterization, and they set up a lot of story threads that can be looked at later, like resentment over Jack being chosen as the Red Ranger, which also raises the question of why he was chosen to be the Red Ranger if the Red Ranger is automatically the leader. Do they only have 5 color options? However, the downside is that there isn't much in the way of resolution for some parts. We don't really see the team come together and having to overcome their teamwork issues or truly accept 2 thieves as full members of the squad. Hell, I don't even think Grum's name is even said in the episode. There's also a greater feeling of scope in this one. These people are the literal B squad, the backup guys, the ones who aren't the best of the best. They're good, no doubt, but they clean up after the A squad, and it's the A squad that destroys the giant monster. There's a larger world out there, and they're not the only ones fighting the war against evil. I'm not sure how I feel about the SPD costumes. The first time I saw the helmets, I thought the Rangers were evil because they reminded me of the Psycho Rangers' design. They've grown on me, but I just don't see why the visors have to be so huge. The uniforms are very efficient in design, going for just the color and a stylized black number to identify which part of the team they're on. It's just different is all. Not bad, just not what I would immediately think of for a Power Rangers uniform. Still, the efficient design works for a government organization. The theme song is awesome. It's energetic, it's a rock tune.
Yeah, I agree with the Linkara. The theme song is so awesome.
It's got great melodies, and it's the kind of Power Rangers music you want to have when your heroes are doing something glorious. And oh yes, it is a Ron Wasserman piece.
Rangers, SPD, Power Rangers to the rescue. Power Rangers, SPD, Power Rangers to the rescue. Please understand this brutality. Even this.
In the next episode, Grum launches an attack on a planet, and Kruger dispatches A-Squad to deal with it while he briefs our heroes about the Emperor. With A-Squad out, the B-Squad is in charge of defending the Earth. However, that's exactly what Grum wants, instead sending the true bulk of his forces to Earth to conquer it. We also meet Mora, a 10-year-old girl in Grum's service, who questions why he's interested in conquering such a puny planet like Earth. He just says he has his reasons. Also on Grum's staff is Broodwing, a mercenary who supplies him with troops and equipment. Mora, in turn, has the ability to draw monsters in her book and cause them to come to life. In early episodes, it's hinted that she used to be very different than what she is now, and Grum frequently threatens to change her back. The Rangers head out in their Zords to deal with their first monster, who in turn is using a giant robot. The Zords are vehicles again this season, called Delta Runners, which once more makes sense for an organization created by a governmental body. They form the Delta Squad Megazord, which is surprisingly maneuverable despite being rather bulky. Of course, I do question the idea of the thing using buildings for cover, but hey, knowing this show, it's probably the abandoned warehouse district. They destroy the robot and imprison the monster. In the following episode, SPD headquarters receives a distress call from the A-Squad saying that it was a trap. It's very likely that the 5 have been destroyed. But enough about plot, let's talk about explosions for a second. Specifically, something that fandom has dubbed Kalish-splosions, though many have said it should be Koichi-splosions, since Koichi Sakamoto is the stunt and action director most likely responsible, though I'm going to stay with Kalish-splosions because he was the man with final say in the matter. This may seem like an odd thing to bring up, but it's relevant to how things are different in this era. The explosions are not handled well, and this trend started at the tail end of Dino Thunder. Power Rangers has always had explosions in it. However, there's a distinct difference in the way they're presented. Going by, say, Mighty Morphin, explosions have been quick. Sparks and blasts, usually small ones, happen all around the Rangers and they get knocked away, or they just manage to avoid getting hit by a blast. However, I started to notice that the explosions a few times in Dino Thunder, and much more times in SPD, were mostly behind the Rangers, and the directors decided that the explosion once isn't enough to convince us it's cool. Instead, they zoom in closer, slow down the same explosion, and have it happen again. The repeating slow zoom is irritating because it makes it seem like the audience's attention can't be focused on multiple elements. It needs to linger on it to get the full impact. Except that we don't need to see the full impact. It's an explosion. We get it. However, the real crime is the back explosions. Now, when they're on motorcycles or driving a vehicle, it makes sense that the explosions are behind them since they're just driving past them. Most of the time. Unfortunately, when this keeps happening, it makes the enemies look like they can't aim for crap. This is especially bad when they're not on vehicles. When an explosion occurs in front of the Rangers or a monster, it gives the illusion that it's much closer to them than it actually is. Those front explosions also tend to be pretty small explosions, but quick enough that you can believe that they were hit by the blast. However, Kalish explosions are huge, but happening behind the team, so either they should be vaporized by the sheer tonnage of it, or they're so far away that it shouldn't affect them. But again, the problem is when the explosions happen behind them, it looks like the enemy missed. But the Rangers leap into the air, flailing their arms, and then fall down anyway. It doesn't make the villain look strong. It makes the Rangers look like wusses because the wind is blowing them over. It gets especially ridiculous when sometimes the villain will have the back explosion, but all it's doing is sending them straight up into the air. It isn't badass, it's just stupid. The slow motion makes it seem like we're supposed to focus on how awesome this is, how impressive this is. But it isn't. It's just boring. Otherwise exciting fight scenes are ruined by this, especially since they keep on doing it. It'll happen multiple times in the same fight, and they're only saved because occasionally we do see a few front explosions and real impacts, but they're few and far between. Hell, with the amount of times they do the background explosions in a single fight, you might as well just film the entire damn thing in front of a green screen if you're not going to bother making it look like the explosions are actually having a real impact on them. And on a show like Power Rangers, which is 75% fight scenes anyway, when you make the fights boring, it really makes the experience unbearable and you just want to skip through it. Now, why is this in any way significant to the actual series? Because it shows how the fighting quality has changed for the worse. In the original days, it was about martial arts techniques. All of the Rangers were skilled fighters, and the fighting was subsequently more impressive because it was being done through actual martial arts. However, as time went on, they started adding more wire works into the fighting to compensate for the lack of abilities by the actors, who didn't have the training that the original actors did. That I didn't actually object to, since it was still fighting, and hey, they are superheroes after all. I can believe them doing like really high jumps and whatnot. But I'm putting my foot down here because the explosions and subsequently a more extensive use of special effects is a terrible thing to do. It's the equivalent of a movie compensating for its lack of story with special effects. Yeah, I like when the Rangers use their guns, but it's not because the gun effects are flashy. It's because guns are a more efficient way of defeating the enemy. In the end, though, the martial arts are a staple of the show, and I don't want to trade them in for big, repeated, slow-motion explosions in a rock quarry. But enough about that. Let's talk